All right, guys, so the next era that we're going to be looking at is the time after World War One, which is also known as the Roaring 20s. Okay, so obviously 1920s. The reason that it's known as the Roaring 20s is because of the complete change in culture, the new ideas, new technologies, all of these things, consumerism that was happening in the United States, and that was making the quality of life so much better for American citizens. And so they were having a roaring good time. Okay, that's why it's known as the Roaring 20s. So during this time, we're adjusting to peace, and between the years of 1919 and 1921, you had several different events happening that were making our adjustment to peace a little tricky. We had to learn how to be an isolationized, ooh, I don't even know if that's a word, an isolationist country. Okay, we had to return to isolationism. If you remember, Henry Cabot Lodge won the argument. We didn't join the League of Nations, and for that reason, we decided to look only at what was happening in our country, and we became isolated. Okay. The government also had to change its budget strategy. They had to stop their wartime spending. We weren't at war anymore. They had to look to spend their funds for the good of the people. You have soldiers from World War I coming home looking for jobs. So that was another challenge. Factories that used to make products that were used in the war had to now convert to creating civilian products. Also, in Europe, you had farmers who lost their markets. And so all of these things, all of these different factors contributed to a temporary, which means it didn't last, recession in the U.S. Economy. Now, what a recession is a time when the economy is not doing well. Okay. So you also had in the Roaring 20s what is known as the Red Scare. Now, we're going to be looking on Monday at what communism is. And when we first started to really take note of the communist government structure in the United States, when you see communist, I want for that word to be synonymous to you with red, okay? Communist red, communist red. What had happened was that in Russia, a lot of the people were really upset with Russia's involvement in World War I. And so there were a group of communist men known as the Bolsheviks who garnered enough support to overthrow the Tsar of Russia, and they formed a new government, a communist government. And so this really, really bothered the United States because in a communist system, it's very different. It's actually the opposite of our capitalist system, which we have known and thrived on for so long. Okay, so we're scared of communists. We're scared of anarchists, which is the absence of government. Okay, anarchy, absence of government, and we're also really suspicious of immigrants that are coming in. So like I told you before, communism, this was the new government system in Russia that was led by a man named Vladimir Lenin, okay? And what happened was that there was a threat of a spread of communism into Europe. And so we're like, oh man, if it's going to come to Europe, then it could also come to the United States. And we don't want it to come to the United States because we're a capitalist nation where people are in control of their own business, of their own property, of their own lifestyles, which is not the way a communist system runs. In a communist system, government controls everything and they try and distribute everything equally to its citizens. And so we become really, really wary of communism. We're really scared of the threat of them coming into our country, and it creates an atmosphere of panic, okay? So Red Scare, what that essentially means is it's a concept of what the atmosphere in the United States was during this time, and we had a huge atmosphere of panic. People were freaking out. They were like scared that communism was going to come to the United States and that we were going to be have our government overthrown. All right. So the Palmer raids. this is another concept that it goes hand in hand with the Red Scare, okay? And what happened was that in January of 1919, an Italian anarchist bombed or put a bomb outside the home of the U.S. Attorney General Mitchell Palmer. Okay, and what was so scary about it was that it wasn't just outside of his house. These anarchists had planted a series of bombs at different members of the U.S. government. And so Palmer was convinced that it was a plot by these anarchists to overthrow our government, our legitimate government. And so, I mean, people started freaking out, including Mitchell Palmer. And he helped to round up over 4,000 suspects, now without warrants. And all of these were going to be like immigrants, people that we were really suspicious of. He was assisted by J. Edgar Hoover, who would go on to be the director of the FBI for, decades. And while most of these people were released, 600 were deported, okay? And so the raids, when you think of a raid, you think of you're going in, you're busting down doors, you're arresting people, raid. And that's basically what happened. Is the only thing is that they were targeting people who had different opinions on how government should be run, and immigrants as well. All right, so then we also had the Seiko and Vanzetti case. All right, now these guys were Italian immigrants. They were also known to have anarchist views, okay, their opinions, which we're all entitled to, but that played greatly against them because they were convicted of murder in the act of a burglary. Okay, now the thing is that because of their anarchist views, people were really anxious to get these guys convicted. Okay, the United States was scared of looking weak to other countries in the rest of the world. They're like, we can't make it look like an anarchist or a communist is going to win in our country, so we really got to put the hammer down. And so even though there really wasn't any evidence against these guys, the judge who heard their case acted really partisan, okay, meaning he was very biased, meaning that he treated them unfairly. Now, these two guys, even though there was a lack of evidence against them, were found guilty and executed in 1927. Okay, so you also have in the United States, as a result of all of these things happening, you have a rise of nativism and racism, okay? Nativism is the belief that your country, your people, the people that are in your country are superior to others, the natives. In other words, this is going to play a huge part in really mistrusting and disliking immigrants. Okay, now racism is the belief that your particular race is superior to other people. Okay, so if you looked at it in this case, if you looked at it like, okay, I'm an American, and it doesn't matter whether I'm Mexican American, African American, Asian American, white American, Caucasian American, it doesn't matter. I believe that Americans are greater than any country, than any other citizen in the rest of the world. That's nativism. It's like huge, overly done patriotism. Okay. Now, racism is when you get into specific race. It would be like a Hispanic person believing that their race is better than the Asian race, or that their race is better than the Caucasian race. However you mix and match it, when you believe that one race is greater than the other, that is racism. So just make sure that you know the difference between these two. And it is happening in the United States. As a result of nativism, there was a huge dislike of foreigners and immigrants. Remember, foreigners are people from different countries. As a result of racism, part of racism in the United States during this time was the idea that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants were superior to all other races. And so when we look at white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, we're going to refer to them as WASPs, okay? WASPs. And the idea was that these wasps were superior. Now, another thing that was happening during this time, remember that this is also a period of time after the end of the Civil War, and it took time for Black people to move from the South to the North. It took them some time. They would hear stories from their relatives in the North saying, you know, how much better life was or whatever. But what happened was that when Black people finally did make it up north, they also felt huge tension. Their migration wasn't as welcome or as easy as they would have thought it was. Now, it had been dead before, but now, during this great migration time, during the belief in wasp superiority, during this time of nativism, you have the reemergence of the Ku Klux Klan, and they come back bigger than ever. Their membership rose to over 4 million people, okay? That is huge. And of course, as a result of the Ku Klux Klan reemerging, the tension of blacks and whites in the North, nativism, the WASP superiority, you get as a result lynchings and continued segregation in the South. All right, so in terms of immigration, you have a few immigration acts passed in 1921, 1924, and 1929. These immigration acts were designed to keep immigrants, to keep away immigrants or keep out immigrants from specifically Southern and Eastern European countries. Remember, these were these new immigrants that came in after the Northern and Western European people. Now, another part of the reason for that is because these areas is where you had a lot of communist tendencies, etc. So people were afraid that if we continued to let them in, would come their ideas as well. Now, so quotas were set up. A quota is a limit on something, and so we were limiting how many immigrants were coming from each country. Okay, and they based the quotas on they based the quotas on how many were currently living there, how many were currently living in the United States from each of those specific countries. So if you had a lot of people from England, then the quota for England would be higher. If you had a lot of people from Scotland, the quota from Scotland would be higher. However, if we didn't have a lot of Russians, then the Russian quota would also be really small. So the quotas were set up in ratio-wise equally to the current population. Now, Asians were not allowed in at all. Okay, there was just no Asians allowed. Okay, this takes us to the concept of eugenics. Okay, now eugenics is this crazy idea that the human race can be improved by breeding. Okay, breeding, like if we were animals or something. So this idea was it tied into the belief that light-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, here your Europeans, your WASPs, were superior to others. And the guy who came up with this idea was Charles Davenport. And he had forced sterilization, segregation laws, and marriage restrictions. Okay, it's crazy that this actually happened in the United States. Okay, they believed in social Darwinism, in survival of the fittest. They thought that we shouldn't allow people who have mental disabilities or any kind of disabilities procreate. All right, so I know that this video was kind of a long one, and I apologize for that, but I also wanted you to have this information for later. So if you have any questions, please ask me on Monday. Talk to you then. Bye.